So glad you're with us on this Tuesday at noon. I'm Michael Aaron alongside meteorologist Scott Covert over in the Weather Center. Man, the Arkansas weather, it's just a roller coaster, huh?
Buckle up. We've got a couple more twists and turns to get through before the week is over with. Today, it is pleasant outside. Temperatures unusually warm. We'll probably end up climbing a few more degrees before reaching that afternoon high temperature. You can see a few clouds making their way across the natural state, filtering in with that sunshine. 61 currently in the capital city. A little bit cooler in Searcy, 52 there, 62 currently in Arkadelphia. The warm spot on the map, 64 both in Camden and Texarkana. Your forecast for us today will take us to 63 degrees. Those winds out there, they've been breezy and will be that way the rest of the afternoon. Expect a wind out of the south 10 to 15 miles per hour with occasional gusts as high as 25. Tomorrow, another unusually warm day, but a strong cold front moves through tomorrow evening and it brings a big blast of Arctic cold air for Thursday and Friday, some of which could result in a little bit of frozen precipitation in northern Arkansas, cold rain elsewhere. We'll talk about the timing of that and what you can expect in your town coming up.
And new at noon, the White House has officially launched covidtest.gov a whole day early. Americans can now order free at-home tests on the website. They'll be limited to 4 per household and are expected to ship within 7 to 12 days of ordering. You can find a link and more info right now on thv-at-noon.com. We started the week with smaller jumps in our COVID numbers, but that's due in large part to low testing from the weekend. 3,600 new infections were reported on Monday. That's 700 fewer than what we saw the same time last week. The weekend dip is also impacting our active cases. For the first time in several weeks, that number actually went down. But Governor Asa Hutchinson says this is likely due to fewer people getting tested, and adding to that number, we cannot say the same for hospitalizations. Those continue to climb. Right now, more than 1,400 people are battling COVID from an Arkansas hospital. And one hospital in the central part of Arkansas is turning its attention to helping people dealing with long-term effects of COVID-19. THV 11's Frederick Price shows us how the Arkansas Heart Hospital is hoping to help.
For many people, COVID-19 has lasting effects.
Shortness of breath and exercise intolerance, but it can be heart palpitations, balance issues, fatigue.
Amanda Seisuda with the Arkansas Heart Hospital says it's something that is even more common than we think.
A number of Arkansans who have been positive for COVID over the last 2 years now, many of those patients have lingering symptoms.
So how do you get those people back on track? Seisuda says last month the hospital was approved to begin a program that aims at helping folks who have lingering effects from the virus.
We sit down one-on-one with one of our exercise physiologists or nurses who will go over their current symptoms and kind of set a goal for their exercise prescription.
Here is how the post-COVID pulmonary rehab program works. For 12 weeks, those enrolled in the program come to the hospital 3 times a week to exercise for nearly an hour each day.
And that doesn't mean that they're exercising for a full hour, because a lot of patients that we're seeing right now that are starting with us are only able to tolerate about 15 minutes of exercise.
These exercises will allow people with breathing and cardiac issues to really work to improve their long-lasting symptoms.
Someone who comes in with shortness of breath still we'll work a lot on breathing retraining.
And this program is fairly new. The hospital actually started it this month, and they tell me they have about 10 people in it already. Doctors and nurses will track the progress of those patients until the end of their 12 weeks. In Little Rock, Frederick Price, THV 11 News.
All right, Frederick, the Heart Hospital says any adult that's experiencing COVID symptoms beyond 4 weeks qualifies for this program. It also requires a referral from your doctor. Omicron-fueled COVID cases are still surging across the nation this afternoon. More than 5.4 million Americans tested positive last week, a new record. But the story is changing in New York City, where numbers are dropping fast in both cases and hospitalizations. While the city is improving, health experts are warning COVID is here to stay.
If you look at the history of infectious diseases, we've only eradicated one infectious disease in man, and that's smallpox. That's not going to happen with this virus.
Moderna hopes to roll out a 2-for-1 jab against COVID-19 and the flu next year. The company's CEO says the single shot could be available in some countries by fall of 2023. The goal here is to help people who may grow tiresome of getting several shots every winter. Moderna first announced it was working on the combination vaccine last September. The state of Hawaii may change its definition of fully vaccinated. The governor there announced his office may require tourists to have 2 vaccine shots against COVID, plus a booster. Otherwise, they'd have to take a COVID test before flying to Hawaii or isolate for 5 days once they arrive. He said tourists can expect several weeks' notice if there's a change. I want to switch gears now to another story that is top of mind for many people. We're learning more about the Texas synagogue standoff from one of the people held hostage there. He's sharing details about the suspect's behavior as the ordeal stretched to nearly 11 hours before coming to a dramatic end. Omar Villafranca is in Colleyville, Texas with the latest on the investigation.
It was very real. We were all very aware of what was going on.
In an interview with CBS station KTVT, hostage Jeffrey Cohen described being held at gunpoint for nearly 11 hours and what he thought might be his final moments at Congregation Beth Israel.
It was very difficult. I called my wife, I called my daughter, called my son. This is what's going on. I love you. And remember me.
One of the hostages was released at 5 p.m. local time, but as negotiations dragged from day to night, Cohen said that Akram grew more belligerent.
He started spouting for a good few minutes. I was going to put a bullet in each of us, whereas earlier in the day, he was going to let us all go, and he was the only one who was going to die.
But before the FBI's elite tactical unit went in, the 3 remaining hostages saw an opportunity to save themselves.
But he put his gun down to pour some soda. And that's the point that Rabbi Charlie threw the chair and yelled, "Run."
This is how Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker described it to CBS Mornings on Monday.
The exit wasn't too far away. I told them to go. I threw a chair at the gunman, and I headed for the door. And all 3 of us were able to get out without even a shot being fired.
The 3 escaped through a side door, and the FBI sprang into action. Within seconds, Akram was shot dead, the hostages alive and free. Members of the synagogue had been through active shooter training, much like this, and credit that in part for getting through the ordeal.
That is what saved our lives.
Meanwhile, the FBI and DHS are warning that faith-based communities will likely continue to be targets of violence by both domestic extremists and those inspired by foreign terrorists. Those targets to be used in attacks to promote personal grievances or ideologies. The FBI is now combing through the suspect's financial records and social contacts, looking for a link to extremism. At a nearby healing service in Southlake, Texas, local officials were pointing to the rise of radicalization during the pandemic, and they're vowing to protect places of worship. Omar Villafranca, CBS News, Colleyville, Texas.
The aftermath of that anti-Semitic attack is being felt across the country, including right here in Arkansas. Temples are supporting their congregations in wake of this hate. Rabbi Barry Block of Temple B'nai Israel in Little Rock is friends with the rabbi held hostage, who you heard from right there in that story. Like many, he's concerned about the rise of anti-Semitism nationwide.
Many religious people in this country can go to their house of worship and not have to worry about security. Here, we have security.
They're not alone. The Shabbat Lupovich of Arkansas has also tightened security over the last few years. Both routinely review security measures and trainings. They also work with local law enforcement to continue hosting services and events safely. I want to turn to a story now that's getting a lot of attention online. Airline executives are issuing a warning this week that AT&T and Verizon's latest 5G mobile service could cause havoc tomorrow. They claim that hundreds of thousands of flights could be grounded because of the new technology. Errol Barnett has more on the situation as airports continue to stress over the winter weather, pandemic staff shortages, and supply chain issues.
On Wednesday, 5G technology kicks in at airports across the country, but major airlines are warning that interference on its C-band spectrum could impact close to half of commercial and cargo flights. Now on Sunday, the FAA made special approval for almost half of commercial flights to operate at about 54% of airports across the country with this technology. And earlier this month, AT&T and Verizon delayed the 5G rollout to negotiate so-called buffer zones around many airports. Still, airlines just don't think it's enough. They're warning sensitive flight instruments like autopilot and terrain warning may be compromised in low visibility conditions, which we saw up and down the Northeast this week. They are asking for lower 5G strength around 50 airports. Now, AT&T and Verizon have not responded to these latest warnings and comments from the airline industry in recent days. The comms companies are pointing to this technology rolling out in 40 other countries as reasons to believe that things will be fine here in the States. Still, airlines are warning they may need to start cutting U.S.-bound international flights starting Wednesday. Errol Barnett.
Errol Barnett reporting for us at Reagan National, and we've just learned that AT&T plans to delay their launch over the fears. More on that tonight at 5.